Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Thursday, October 6th, 2022. I am Damon. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and change. I have not blocked you, JVM 1341. We just had some technical difficulties getting the bird off the ground this morning, but they are here. Mark Porter, Bill Kurelic, the two premier recruiting voices in Ohio, have joined us for their usual Thursday visit. Gentlemen, how goes it?
Hanging in there.
Going well this morning.
I'd like to start with Jordan Hall. Not a name that has been bandied about here as much as probably it should have been. Mark has a report coming, an offer evaluation coming out here in a little bit. But Jordan Hall, to me, was a bit of a revelation. I went and watched him. He's much better than I thought. I realize he's got a 5-star status, but at State, obviously, we are used to that. Bill, maybe let us know. In fact, let's do it this way. Mark, tell us what kind of player you think he is. I mean, he looks like a man.
Yeah,
like I'll say, he's a grown man playing with children. Maybe his physical dimensions and what you saw out of him, and then Bill, maybe I know there's been a recruiting update.
Yeah, I'll digress for a minute before I jump into Jordan Hall. I actually went to see Jordan Hall on Friday night, but Jordan Hall from the KIPP Academy, the 6'7" offensive tackle that Bill and I watched at the Ohio State camp. And Ohio State gave him as many reps as possible, right, Bill? I mean, we stood there and they kept putting Jordan Hall back in. He might be one of the best linemen to look at in the class of 2023, and he's out of KIPP in Columbus, which is a newer school or you don't hear about too much. I went to check him out with a bunch of other kids, and I'll just talk about him. He looked pretty good again. I mean, he really is developing at a pace where he's going to be at a big-time program. I don't think it's going to be Ohio State, but they definitely kicked the wheels on that Jordan Hall. So the Jordan Hall that Dan is talking about is from Jacksonville, Florida, defensive tackle, measured in about 6'5", about 300 pounds, I was told. I was reading a blog on him in December. And when you turn on the film, you cannot believe he is that big. And when you get a couple close-ups, you see that he actually is that size. But I say that because he's one of these athletes. The first comparison I made, and I think it was just the Florida vibes I was getting, was Warren Sapp. I mean, he looked like one of those three-technique penetrators, NFL guys that's coming off the ball, and it's everything you can do to stop him. Now, the question marks with him, or maybe why we haven't heard about him, is the level of competition. He doesn't get blocked on that whole film. There's not a kid on that film that actually stands in his way and takes on the charging rhino. He's blowing the gaps. He's blowing through their shoulder pads. So the level of competition can be questioned. He didn't see another 300-pounder step over in front of him and man him up and, shed that guy to get to the play. He's just being an unbelievable athlete and just taking over games that kids have no chance at in high school. The measurables are there. The quickness is there. The size and speed there. Now it's just, will he develop when he sees big-time competition wherever he goes? Can he handle other 280, 300-pounders on him every single play? Because that's not what he's seen right now. So there's the leap of faith with him. That's kind of the evaluation. But no doubt his talent and his ability are rare for his size. It's really a great film to see a big man move.
Bill, the recruiting update had the fateful final visit as the game.
Yeah, Jordan Hall was a guy that I started writing about, I believe, last spring, maybe late winter, but sometimes late winter, spring. I wrote my first article on Jordan Hall. At that point, he was interested in Ohio State, and Ohio State was interested in him, but he wasn't getting the recruiting attention that he is now from schools. He's kind of blowing up some on the recruiting trail. And it's interesting, this summer I talked to one of my Florida sources in Florida who really thought this guy is really good. He said, he was talking about some of the schools down there, the Florida Gators in particular. He said, I don't know why they're not recruiting him harder. That he's really good. As he put it, they should be. And I did a follow-up, I think, in the summertime maybe. But lo and behold, then the bigger schools, really did start getting in on him. I know that I did an article kind of having the news that he was going to make an official visit to Ohio State for the Michigan game, and that is still set. As Mark said, he doesn't play necessarily against, he goes to West Side High School, not exactly the biggest name football program in the state of Florida. It's in Jacksonville, West Side. And that maybe has a little to do with why he's kind of blowing up now as opposed to then. But in any event, he's 6'5" almost. He's 300 plus pounds, and he's got the offers. He's a guy that the schools now want, and he is going to make that official visit to Ohio State for the Michigan game. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, in terms of a prospect to be developed, I guess the quality of competition, good Lord, just redshirt the guy. How many guys at 300 pounds get off the ball like that? And as Mark and Bill have said, the level of competition, and I encourage everybody to go watch the video, maybe isn't high, but he plays defensive end in a lot of spots in a four-man front, and his jump is quick. I mean, even if there was a guy in front of him, and Mark's literally the player windshield to this guy. I've never seen anything like it. So.
And I never, when I scout guys, I never try to criticize them when they play lower competition because that's not their fault. It's nothing they have control over. What I do ask of them when they play lower competition is dominate it the way you should and look the way you should against poor competition, which he obviously does. It's a blow you away highlight. It's too good of a highlight film is almost what it is. That's what raises the eyebrow, like, who's this kid playing against? I mean, he's just in the backfield with a tackle for loss every other play. So he's doing what he should against poor competition. You'd really have your eyebrows raised if the highlight film, I guess, didn't look like this. So level of competition doesn't bother me the way it bothers, I guess, other people, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do against it.
And so kids just blow up. They have, this is a reason why, and Ohio State virtually always does this. They don't use all their scholarships up by the end of the summer because they want to be able to have a scholarship or two for a kid that has a great senior year. Case in point is another one. Arian Carter, a linebacker from Smyrna, Tennessee, committed to Memphis early. He's not going to end up at Memphis unless I'm dead wrong on this. And I don't think I'm dead wrong on this. He's not going to end up at Memphis. He's got Alabama chasing him hard now. He's got Ohio State that offered him last Friday night, which we had an article on Bucknuts late Friday night about that offer. He's got the big Tennessee, University of Tennessee wants him, the home state school now. He's had a great senior season. He's 6'1", 212 pounds. Maybe not prototype linebacker size right now, but he can play. And he's blowing up. And Ohio State is now, after Jim Knowles talked to him before his game on Friday night and offered him a scholarship. So kids do have great senior seasons. They do blow up. And it's nice to have a scholarship or two available for these kind of guys.
With us diving into recruiting a little bit, I'm going to talk a little more today. Bill's right. Between your sophomore and senior year, it's not unusual for kids to grow 2-4 inches, put on 10, 15, 20 pounds, drop a 40 time, get experience, not be so raw. So Jordan Hall in Ohio are two perfect examples of what Bill's saying. I guarantee that Ohio State has watched the Jordan Hall from Kip in Columbus the same way they watched the one down in Jacksonville. Have these kids progressed from their junior film? Are they a completely different human 1 year later after losing 20 pounds, growing 2 inches, going to a bunch of summer caps, coming out of their shell, maturing, 19 different things, the light bulb comes on? That's why I got to go back and scout kids sophomore year, junior year, senior year, and make sure they're not a different human being at this time in their lives, because this is when that happens. So Bill's right. These kids that blow up senior year, there's nothing the matter with them. It's just doing unbelievable amounts of homework, which Ohio State has the staff to do that. Right. They can go flip all those senior stones and say, hey, let's go back over 200 seniors, where a lot of programs, and I'm not airing their dirty laundry, they don't go back over senior film. They offer all their kids as juniors. They take all their commitments, and they're on to the next class, and they save the resources of going through all that senior tape and not finding a kid like this, or, finishing up your homework.
And put on the tape. Do the same thing for Arian Carter. Put on the article I did yesterday, actually, has his first half of his senior season highlight video. Watch that video. You're going to see a really good player. You're going to see a running back linebacker that gets to the ball and makes plays. If you looked at his junior tape, which I didn't because Ohio State wasn't on him then, but I'll bet you it's a lot different than his first half of his senior year video. I'll bet you there's a big difference because this one's really, really good.
So you're going to have Dan make me break down both videos and tell us the difference now.
That would be
the operative word there being make.
Make, yeah, there you go. Get that done, Bucknutters.
But I tell you what, I don't know if you guys remember this, but an inability to handle this process correctly is what ended Mac Brown's tenure at Texas. They got into the habit of taking all the Texas kids in their junior year and projecting them, and they missed on about half of them. Yep. So it screwed them over. But again, the interest in the Texas guys back then was so high that they had to take them early, and they gambled and missed. I think you're right. Listen, these are teenagers, man. Things are fluid. Guys have growth spurts. I mean, Anthony Davis, the basketball player, started high school at 6'1" and finished at 6'10". So I imagine his offer list changed.
Look at Luke Montgomery and Austin Sierreveld. Both those guys were 6'3", 6'4" a couple of years ago. Now they're both 6'5", and Luke Montgomery's stretching out every time I see him. And then, it's not like Ohio State can predict that, but you're making these bets sometimes that, these kids are going to keep growing and their bodies are going to keep changing. It's a never-ending process, good and bad.
We're going to take a quick break, pay some bills, and we'll come back and take some questions here. All right, we are back. Gentlemen, I think you're required to answer this. Georgia, Ohio State, or Alabama? Let's talk some football real quick. How do you think things are going now that we are about almost to the halfway point of the season? Do you see Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia on the same tier and kind of everyone else in another one? What's your vibe? Bill, take that first.
Well, obviously I've watched all the Ohio State games. I've watched Alabama some. I've watched Georgia some, not as much as Ohio State. But when I think of Alabama and Georgia, I think of two very talented programs that have shown that while they are very talented and very good, they're not always really dominant. Georgia, close game. Alabama, close games. So I'm seeing those as the three top schools, but I don't have, as some of our SEC friends I'm sure do, have Georgia and Alabama dominant. I think that from what I see right now, any one of those three teams, you could make a case for them being number one in the country at this point. I don't know that I can make a case for anybody else besides one of those three teams being number one in the country. That's what I see so far.
How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I haven't seen as much college football. I'm on the road scouting some Saturdays, but I've seen, or what I've thought about Ohio State all year as I'm doing the eye in the sky is they're a developmental thing right now. They're still feeling their way around on offense. Their receiver core is young. Henderson didn't play last week. They've had a few guys missing. I think what Ohio State will do is build up to a peak at the end of the year, and hopefully they peak. They may have a scare left on their schedule where they get a tough half or they get into a dogfight, because that's college football, and that's what's happening to these other great teams. But this is going to be about who's peaking around Michigan time, playoff time. In Ohio State, if they get the receiving core back, they get these reps, those freshmen become sophomores at the end of the year. Those sophomores become juniors. So that experience that we're getting now is what's going to make hopefully Ohio State the number one team towards the end, because the talent that's coming up at receiver is national elite talent, win national championship talent. The defensive line talent that's young is big time talent that's young right now. So as the season progresses, I think Ohio State will get better. The other two teams, I can't really give you that in-depth view, but if they're surviving weeks now and getting scares, they have their own developmental problems through the season. And I think if you played these teams now, it would be totally different than if you played them in 2 months at the end of the year with all the practices and development that comes along with that. So I kind of, danced around that answer, but Ohio State to me is a developmental team right now with top-notch talent that needs to be seasoned.
The defense, difference to me this year as opposed to the last 2 years is pretty simple. Defense.
Yep.
Ohio State, last 2 years you're thinking, oh my goodness, we as in Ohio State, we don't have the ball anymore. What's going to happen? I don't watch the games now and think that. I watch the games now and think Ohio State's defense is going to stop the other team, and that's the difference to me. Jim Knowles has done an incredible job in a short period of time with that defense.
And let me do one more note on that defense. We all, chronicled a bunch, and I've watched a bunch of tape. It's very complex. Guys moving everywhere, guys thinking on defense pre-snap. Now, go back a year, Ohio State went with the theory we're going to sit in vanilla, and hopefully guys know their role so well they play fast and they're not thinking, okay? That works, doesn't work, but I think when the Knowles defense gets some seasoning and these guys get comfortable with all the pre-snap movements and all the thinking goes away, there's still much growth to this defense. Like, I think you're still seeing, the baby vanilla stage of this defense, and every week you're adding wrinkles, you're firming up the base coverages that you're now so secure in and you have confidence in, and those things are going to make that defense even better as they keep playing, because this is still a developmental defense. I mean, they're not very many games into their season, and they're already I feel like they're going to stop people. Yeah, I think that only gets better too.
And looking ahead, I see only positives out of that, because kids are mentioning to me when I talk to them that Ohio State plays defense now, and that they are interested in being a part of that defense for couple reasons. Number one, it's a good defense. And number two, it's a fun defense. It's an aggressive defense. It's an attacking defense, and kids like to do that.
No, it's impressive. Maybe we should have seen this coming, because obviously the schematics are different, but Jeff Hafley came in here and was an overnight sensation too. So it's pretty clear Ohio State has the materials needed for an excellent defense. It's a matter of getting the maestro in here to organize it correctly. I think losing Hafley after one season caught Day off guard a little bit, and we have now recovered, thankfully. Next question, William. Keon Keeley has an Alabama visit this weekend, and Damon Wilson, or Damone Wilson, I still don't know what the answer is headed to Georgia for a visit. Those are the two of the three tight ends that Ohio State has chased ad nauseum. Can you please give us your vibes as they head into these SEC weekend visits?
This is going to be a huge weekend, and for Ohio State recruiting wise, and they're not playing at home. There's no cross recruits to host. It's going to be big for that reason. Alabama hosts Texas A&M, and Keon Keeley is going to be there. And I also should mention KJ Bolden, who is related to Perry Eliano, Ohio State safety coach. And KJ Bolden is a huge Ohio State target. He is planning to be at Alabama this weekend. Georgia is hosting Jordan Hall and Damon Wilson. We talked about Jordan Hall. So, how things go this weekend is going to give us a much better idea. I said back when Damon Wilson made his official visit to Ohio State, I said the two schools right now, at that point, to keep in mind, the two schools I think it's going to come down to for Wilson will be Ohio State and Georgia, and Wilson is going to be at Georgia this weekend, so as well as Jordan Hall. So I think we're going to have a lot better feel maybe about a week from now, maybe sooner, but a week from now, of what Keon Keeley is going to do and what Damon Wilson are going to do. Two key visits. These are the two big threats to Ohio State, so to speak. For Keeley, it's Alabama, and for Damon Wilson, it's Georgia, and they're going to be at those schools this weekend.
Two biggies. Obviously, if you think about it, this is where the championships are won and lost. I don't mean to be too just stark about it, but if you've got the same 3 or 4 teams competing for the championship and it comes down to the same 3 or 4 dudes in the recruiting cycle, these elite defensive ends are obviously, invaluable. So let's hope we can pull that off.
I might also add, Dan, just throw this out there. Pretty good quarterback, Ryan Montgomery. Great quarterback, actually. I was being facetious saying pretty good. Ryan Montgomery is going to be at Georgia this weekend too, by the way. He's got an offer from Georgia, and he's going to be at that game as well.
Here's my thing. If we don't get Luke Montgomery's brother and Perry Eliano's nephew, I got issues. But we'll discuss those when we cross them. Spider Sillery, one of the best we got here. William, where do you think the Buckeye coaching staff heading this week during the bye week? Obviously, we play Michigan State. Hold on a sec. Sorry. Play Michigan State, then a week off.
Yeah. Typically what they do is they try to hit the schools of their commitments and top targets. So obviously we know their commitments. Top targets, we've talked about some of them already. You've got Keon, Keeley. You've got Damon Wilson. You've got Mateo, of course, out in California. Wouldn't be surprised. This will be an interesting one I'll be checking out. Wouldn't be surprised if Jim Knowles ends up making a little pit stop in Tennessee to see a Ryan Carter. That wouldn't surprise me at all. They'll get out to the Ohio schools to see the kids that they like there. It's the 2023 guys to finish things up that they're going to go see, and then their top targets on the 2024 class. And, if you look at our database and the 247 Sports, Bucknuts.com database for the 2024 top targets, that'll give you a little roadmap of where to expect the Ohio State coaches to be.
Mark, high school question, and Bill, you can chime in if you got any vibe on this. Lakota West, down my way, suburban Cincinnati, in between. I guess you call it Westchester. Lakota West looks like a tough out in the playoffs. Is there a quarterback in Division I that can throw against that secondary this year? Is Lakota West good enough in the defensive line and linebacker to hold up against a running team? Very specific question, Mark, but you've seen them play.
I've seen Lakota East. Bill has seen Lakota West. Yeah. I know enough about Lakota West and their talent to answer it. And you're right. They have a secondary that is lights out, that they can flat out man up with anybody, make your life miserable, bring the heat, and they have the heat to bring. They got a big defensive line. Linebackers are okay for Lakota West. It's like because their secondaries like all world and some of their defensive linemen are all world, the linebackers are just normal humans or something. They're good high school football players. There are no quarterbacks in Division I that are big time this year. There's not like a Drew Aller that's going to come to town and just tear you apart. The best quarterback in Ohio is actually in my hometown of Canfield, Brock Lowry, and he's committed to Indiana. The second best quarterback in Ohio might be Mitchell Bolden at Lakota West. So the best quarterback is on your own team, and the other quarterback headed to Division I is at Jackson, Ohio, down by the Ohio River, and he's headed to Marshall. So there's only three big-time quarterbacks in Ohio. Drew Novak down at Western Brown in Cincinnati, he's lighting everybody up, but you won't see him in the playoffs at Division I. What Lakota West should worry about is a complete team coming in and playing them in a complete tight game. But we're going to see both those teams late in the playoffs. What I'm talking about, St. X, Moeller, St. Ignatius, St. Edwards, the Catholic schools you're going to run into. I figured I would see Lakota West in the playoffs and save them. In my world of trying to find teams, I kind of say, okay, that's a team that's a safe bet for week 12 or week 13. I can see other teams until then, and I get more scouting out of it. So I will be to see them. I wish I had a better answer, but Bill may be able to say something because he's seen them.
First of all, I stopped going to high school games at the end of October because I'm old and I don't want to get cold. So I had to see them earlier. I will be at high school games in the playoffs, but the bones aren't that brittle yet.
If not, I want your contract.
But yeah, I've seen Westchester, Lakota West, and they are good. They are really good. They played Mason this past week. Mason, I believe, they might have been 5-0 or 4. I think they maybe lost one game, and they played against Lakota West, and Lakota West beat them 37-7. And Lakota West is now 7-0. That secondary is loaded. You got how many secondaries in Ohio have an Ohio State commitment in their secondary? That being Malik Hartford. You got a Notre Dame commitment in Minich in your secondary. You got Tabron Benny Powell, who is a 2024 kid that has got Power 5 offers, and Ohio State's looking at him. They're loaded in the secondary.
And then
So
Bukari Miles is another one.
yeah, exactly. So that is one heck of a secondary.
Yep. And hold on, they lost an Ohio State guy out of their secondary from last year. So Alex Safari, and so they had so much that secondary for 2 years in a row has been off the charts.
Jair Brown, we've already seen that.
That's what I'm saying. Jair Brown, Alex Safari. I mean, you lost an Ohio State. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's really
that's an incredible run. Like from being around this area, I have a hard time explaining how you could get a run. I mean, it's just luck, I guess. But to back up, to have 2 Ohio State guys and a Notre Dame guy around there, I mean, those are ridiculous to have them on one team. And it's not even a private school, by the way, in a town where they're doing a lot of – the fact that Lakota West could build that team up with Moeller and everyone having everyone's email address, that's impressive.
I mean, and then, we'll just say this. As Bolden has come to Lakota West, you've seen Coleraine start losing and Lakota West start winning. So maybe coaching has something to do with it, So
does.
Noted.
All right, we'll finish with this. I think this guy almost broke the internet last time we brought his name up, so let's try it again, William. Do we have any news on Dijon Johnson liking a lot of Ohio State on again?
Well, right now, I still think it's Florida. I still have him crystal ball to Florida. I think that one, to some extent, is in Ohio State's court, the ball a little bit. He decommitted. And Ryan Day was not going to just let him walk right back into that class once you decommitted. So Dijon Johnson, was interested in Ohio State, and Ohio State was still interested in him. He spoke with Ryan Day. That did not necessarily work out right away. I don't necessarily have that one going Ohio State's way right now, but it's still a long way till signing day. And recruiting, things change. Maybe things change. I just think right now the 2 main players are Florida, followed by Miami, and we'll see what Ohio State wants to do. But I still have Florida as the crystal ball pick right now for Dijon Johnson.
All right, I was kidding. Now let's really finish up. Let's have you both give us where you're headed this weekend and maybe your vibe on Ohio State's trip to East Lansing. Go ahead, Mark.
Down to Cincinnati, see Mason and Sycamore and Kings of Lebanon. 4 of the bigger schools down there. Got to knock out some of their prospects. And like I was mentioning, I'm saving some really good matchups for the playoffs when there's going to be some high-level football. So a lot of these next couple of weeks, I may be places where I'm kind of checking off the list of guys I want to see or teams that may not be in the playoffs very long.
William?
Hold
on a sec. Mark, no vibe on East Lansing?
No, not really. I mean, it should be business as usual. I mean, I think Ohio State just keeps developing. I don't even know if these games are about wins because I think the wins are the given. It's just how much development comes in that game. How much offense do you get in? How well is it executed? I think that's what I'm looking for on tape. It's a lot of this Big Ten should be, easy stuff for Ohio State. And I don't mean to minimize it because we're going to get a scare. It always happens, but it's about development and progression.
Bill?
I will be headed to Southwest Ohio again, as usual. Seems like I'm there every weekend, but I'll be going to the Springfield at Centerville game.
Nice.
The reason I picked that game is that it's an hour and a half away. The Cleveland Indians play their first playoff game at 12. It'll be over by 4, and I can get there in time. That's the only reason I'm going to that game. Again.
No good players at that game. Just no players to watch. Just go to a game.
Yep. Now I'm going to that game because obviously Springfield has Aaron Scott, Ohio State 2024 cornerback offer, and I saw him at the beginning. I saw him last year in one of the games, and I saw him at the beginning of this season. It was a scrimmage when Springfield came up here and scrimmaged Westerville Central. But I want to see him in a game now. So I'm going to go down to see that game, to see Aaron Scott in action. But it's going to be a good game. Springfield's 5-1, I believe. Centerville, I believe, is 6-1. I think that's correct. And these two teams are good. Springfield's loaded. That is a great program. When I saw them at the beginning of the season, they were very young on both sides of the line. I'm sure those kids have grown up some 5, 6, 7 games into the season. And, I think they're a school that is going to get back to the playoffs and probably do quite well again.
I'm hearing I know a number of kids on both those teams. The offensive coordinator for Springfield, Chris Wallace, is fantastic. And the GWalk has been an exciting league to follow this year. Close games, fantastic finishes, some real upsets. So I think Springfield and Centerville are pretty much considered the two heavyweights. So it'll be very interesting to see. No vibe on East Lansing, William?
Well, I would totally agree with Mark. I think it'll be pretty much business as usual. Going to Michigan State sometimes in the past it would scare you some, but I just think there's just too much of a talent difference. And Ohio State can stop people now, and their offense really looks good. And they haven't really even had Jackson Smith and Jiggly yet.
Truth. Speaking of too much we appreciate these guys stopping by every Thursday. Sorry we got off to a late start today. Have a great weekend.